Welcome back, folks. Great to see you guys after our show and our live stream, and wonderful attendance. Fun. I think fun was had by everybody. This is our first question afterwards, but I want to just mention Adra Brown was on, and after the whole show was over, the next day I think she came in with a really nice contribution. I really appreciate that, Adra. So thank you. I'm mentioning it. You're our first supporter for this show. I know you are contributing it to that one, and Mr. Producer's probably get really happy that we made enough to pay our help. All right, which were professional guys, by the way, good performers. I'm doing something exploratory today for you all out there, and that is I'm trying to find out if I can zoom just the voice of Blake. Before you heard Blake on a conversation here, and he was in the background behind me actually looking at the images, but now I'm sharing on a Zoom the images with him. And so he can watch it vicariously. So you guys, anywhere around the globe, if we can make a connection by Zoom, I could possibly take your questions this way. And I'm very interested in doing it because it keeps me alive and keeps the conversation, enlivens the conversation. So I don't know what else I introduced with. I managed to make the mistake of not turning on my recording button, so we're starting from scratch, which for you is scratch anyway. But Blake, thank you for your patience.
Yep, I'm glad to be here.
Blake's question starts with, can you provide general advice regarding the visual order and plein air? So you know what the visual order is. This is what I talk about all the time. The visual order, by the way, is order in painting. It's just the nature. You got something in front of you. There are darkest darks, lightest lights. They're the things that are most powerful to your eyes and the things that are most recessive. Again, there's the reds, the yellows, the blues. You know what order is. And there's a painting order too, but the visual order is just the nature of things visual, right? The way they align. So, but the general advice I give regarding the visual order, so can you provide general advice regarding the visual order and plein air? I will say this before we go any further than that it's just simply what we do. Everything you're doing is organizing. So it's not different outdoors from indoors. The problem is, as he says, what's my goal when painting and plein air? In conversation, you made it seem like it might be different than a still life. I'm actually trying to get people to paint plein air because it isn't different from a still life. But you're not going to understand the best way to paint. And what I mean to say is you will not have explored best possibilities if you don't if you haven't painted interiors and still lifes and figures and portraits and outdoors. Because you want to be one guy. You want to be painting with one brush, so to speak. Your methodology shouldn't be changing constantly. Now, if you're doing an imaginative painting, and everybody can go and paint outlines and fill in the colors and all that sort of stuff. But I'm talking about if you're painting impressionistically, your approach to your impressionistic image, which is what Blake is talking about, will be the same. It wants to be the same. If you don't paint outdoors, you'll be lacking clarity about it. And for you guys who are intimidated of painting outdoors, paint outdoors. Follow Paxton's advice who didn't himself look very comfortable outdoors, but follow his advice to Gamel. If you're intimidated by it, it's what you need to be doing. All right, then number 2, related, I'll often get bogged down in an insignificant area of the painting, losing time and energy. It seems I have difficulty prioritizing effects as well as summarizing them. Can you make more clarity for us on that last question there, Blake?
Yeah, so there's so much going on in nature that I want to. I start drawing from the very beginning, and I'll draw everything there is, every edge and every small little thing, and at the same time, I try to cover the canvas
Yeah,
and
right.
be as painting efficiently as I can. So
Right.
that's where I mean by summary.
Yeah,
But I often end up with kind of a false flatness.
yeah. Okay. Well, so this thing about covering the canvas is one thing, and I am trying to cover the canvas, in if I'm doing an outdoors one in an hour and a half, whatever I think the framework is that works in that setting. I do try. I actually do, unless I'm willing to put in those really brief stints. I really do try to avoid dramatic areas that shift dramatically in a matter of minutes. So I don't recommend them, and especially for a student. But prioritizing effects is a big deal. If you don't know how to blur your eyes, and if you're not consistent with blurring your eyes, you won't be making good choices. And because effects are driven, there is an order to the effects. And the wisdom is the strong ones first. Those strong and easy, they control the whole canvas surface, and they're easiest to draw because they're so strong. So if you don't prioritize them, it's because you're not blurring, or if you don't build it into your system to paint using those things as the basis of your setup, consider doing that as well. Is that clear, what I'm saying on that, Blake?
Yeah, that's clear.
So let's go to your second portion, unless you wanted to do more clarity there. Is that good enough for now?
No, I think this will help actually.
Okay. Okay, I had a really hard time finding words for this question, but if you could just speak about what you expect your students to accomplish in plein air, that would help. Actually, that's really interesting because most of my students want to know what to do first, second, and third. I like the idea that you're asking that question and saying, what ought it be at a certain point. That's a huge thing, and you need to distinguish between those two things. What do you do first, second, and third is like I'm trying to get people to go around and just set color notes out there and study their relationships first, okay? And second, to begin to find what we call drawing, but it was just placement of major effects, and begin to organize the canvas into the proper, into the composition that you've got looking through the viewfinder, which has to do with exits and placements of major effects and stuff like that. So, but the end of the day, you want to cover the canvas, but not what Blake was saying was slicking it up, filling it all up like a big fat notes, like a paint roller in a house, but with broken searching color. But the idea is still to get by the end of your time there to get the canvas covered. It can't be the most dominating thing. You got to consider that you can come back the next day because it's more important for you to do good work and to have a good base, which is good relationships of colors and values and locations, this to this, that to that. It's more important to have those doing well than the speed kills thing. I think what Leonardo said is important, that speed will come. So make haste slowly, take your time in this phase, do good color relations of just spots. Paint by the spot. That's Boston School thinking 101, right? It's the whole Monet thing too. Just think spots of color and think distributing them around the canvas and begin to allow yourself to think this through. You need to know what your lightest lights are and set them down there. You need to know what your darkest darks are and set them down there. But I say, you see my hand making 2 strokes, making a couple strokes. It doesn't mean set it down there. Don't smear the canvas full. Yeah. So I think my plein air results tend to be really inconsistent. Do you have any thoughts about that, Blake? Did I say things that might be useful there?
Um, well, so I just wanted to make a comment about the word accomplish because
Yeah.
I hadn't even thought about that until I sat down to write this question. And I was having such a hard time figuring out what the question was because I didn't know what I was heading towards
Yes.
in a painting.
Yeah. Well, that really matters. And I tell you, that is the one thing nobody ever tells you. If you're studying with me, that's what you're trying to get, what I get, I think that's the assumption. And I remember having that same question as a young person, but I don't know if I asked it ever and didn't get an answer or if I was too intimidated to ask it. But it's a perfectly good question. But the real question is we already know, in a sense, what the answer is. We're trying to get what we see in front of us to look like that. What's sitting on the canvas to look like what we see in front of us if you're just an impressionist painter. That requires a whole bunch of experience with how do you make a thing false look true, meaning you can't paint the sun with the yolk of an egg. Knowing that, what are you going to do to make it appear sunny and all those sorts of things? So that does a lot of time and patience is required for that part of it. But yeah, so you might want to have that in mind. So let me go with you. I did this before with you, but I want to do it for the viewers. I'm just going to walk you through paintings so you have an idea. If you look at these without looking too hard, and I won't talk about them. I'll try not to. But these are just a bunch of paintings that are examples of paintings done this way. Okay? That's me. That's John Peterson, one of my students from a ways back. That's me again. This is me again. This is one of my students, Lindsay. Monet. Tarbell. This is Bunker, and I'll come back to this and talk about it in different ways. This is Tarbell again. Are you beginning to see some patterns here? This isn't that hard to grasp, is it? It's obviously just a slice of life and nature sitting in front of you, isn't it? Isn't that what you see, Blake?
Yeah, it's it's simple when you put it like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to not take that. Some of the things that are taken for granted mustn't be. It's just funny. I mean, one of the interesting things about this setup here, and this one that I recall, by the way, is that this area here was in more shade. I was wondering why the water was so much brighter and even yellower, and this was cooler. But I remember looking back on it, this had a few flecks of light in it. But that was, anyway, I'm just mentioning that. But it was only just the general impression of the area. You can see I'm not trying to paint lots of little stuff. But let's not use that anymore. I just wanted to say that was an answer to that very interesting question of, do you know what you're aiming at? Well, the magic of the look of nature in front of you, right? And now I could also say just the way it impressed you, make sure whatever you get on your canvas, make somebody else want to, say, oh man, I see why you painted that spot. you know. Now, if you painted it because there was a grasshopper sitting on a little teeny leaf somewhere, like the little drips on some of those Dutch paintings, the leaves in some of those Dutch paintings or those insects, if that's what you painted it for, it's another story. This is a different animal, right? This is the whole thing in a rectangle. It's the summary of the general impression, the magic that produces that. And I am trying to get it. Again, you're trying to ask what the question is, how to get it in the first day. I think my plein air results tend to be really inconsistent because I don't know what a finished 1 hour painting should look like. So the question about 1 hour is a big one. I want good quality, as much quality as I can get, and beautifully interrelated, everything rightly interrelated, even if I don't cover the canvas in the lay-in in the first day. Okay, so whatever you do, put down, beautifully regulated, right? Well related. So you put something down, you can get it right to this and to that and to that. And no matter what you add to the painting, you fleck, make sure you look around and keep that going with the idea of being incorporative, getting this to this and that to that. That's, the summary of Brackman, this to this and that to that, is really what you're doing out there, especially in that first day. If you do nothing but spots and don't do any drawing, there will be a certain amount of drawing just by placement when you distribute spots. You're not going to put the sky down in the bottom. You know what I mean? Except in certain circumstances. All right, I'll often paint. Is that clear, Blake?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I'll often paint 8 by 10 or 5 by 7 and don't return to the same painting. I would recommend you do. Yeah. Should I plan to paint more than once? Yeah, I would. Because you're actually you come back the second day, you got a fresh eye. You can see how you screwed up. Especially if you can have the wit to get back with the same kind of light and the same kind of day and the same time of day. You got to do all those things. So that's something you can read in Rewald's book on and other ones on Monet. You'll get clarity about what he was thinking that way. We've read that some of his stuff were 20 minutes and out, 20 minutes and out. He'd pick up another canvas and set it on the canvas. So some of these pictures, the haystacks, they might have been done one after the other that way, as with the changing light, shadows, changing angles, and so on. Okay. So yeah, plan to do that. And then I struggle to fill an 8 by 10 before the light changes. I think we've answered enough of that, have we? That you're struggling to fill it. We get that. It's just time that's going to take you more time. But don't be in a rush to fill it with junk, right? Haste makes waste. So shall we look at some pictures, Blake?
Yeah.
You said, so these paintings by me and John Peterson are in the studio. You're looking at for guidance, but not sure how to get to this state of development. So that's a good, that's the way you phrase that, I like. So you'd like to wind up the day with this much development, the picture looking like it's all there. I mean, this might have been a 2-day thing. It wouldn't have been 3 days. But this is only a 8 by 10, I think you said. So how much of this data in here is very accurate, right? This kind of stuff here. Well, if you see something in me that's sharp edged, it's probably pretty accurate. Or if it's high contrast, it's probably pretty accurate. Like this arc is going to be very accurate. The placement of these things. Anytime they're exits, they're going to be very accurate. So that's where I'll be putting my time in. But I won't be sitting in any of these places and saying, no, that doesn't look enough like that rock. Well, I mean, it may occur to me that it doesn't look enough like that rock, and I'll see it's because I have one of the major effects in the wrong place or something. And so the proportion is funny, but that's the kind of backstruggler mindset you're going to be with. But if you can just say, let's paint this thing and let's just hit colors. Here's this greenish sort of funny note, the sap green kind of thing, and here's this purpley one here, and there's some blue stuff here. And if you just keep going around, allowing yourself the freedom for that few moments of just taking color for color, not knowing what anything is, and just having looked through your viewfinder, know about where to place it. This was, I think, a concrete wall up here. A bridge was going over somewhere up there. And but these notes, they're all just actually just trying to be in play. Just they're trying to be in discussion. Is that the right word? In flux, in motion would be a better way to say it. And so when my dark is dark, it appears that I thought this might be the darkest dark, or maybe this or something. But you see the darkest dark thing, and you're setting these tables for yourself. That's a decision. Down here, I sometimes look at some of these paintings I've done on these rocks and wonder why I made that black. But why not make it as dark as it appears? And yet, you always want to keep your eye, of course, on the ensemble of the whole general effect to make sure the whole picture is as light or as dark as it generally appears, and also as rich. The color notes is rich. So I try to avoid painting really black if I can't see color in the blacks, it's too black. So it's one of those standards if you're going to get that dark. I don't have a problem with using black outdoors, especially in areas like this, right? Blake asked me something about this one. Maybe talk about this one. I know
Oh,
what you're trying to do is fill it up. Yeah.
one of the reasons why I like this painting is because it's so clear where you would put the hard edges in the
Mm,
drawing on
mm,
the first day.
mm-hmm. Good.
Um,
Yeah. You're talking about right there.
yeah, the edges of the waterfalls and where the rock meets the water.
Yep.
Um, but in my case, I would get stuck in that rock
Yeah.
and that shadow line of that rock. I would spend my whole time there.
Yeah. Like down here, you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the patience model, really like that thing that from DeSales that Kevin sent out today, but it really is one that, for example, your job is to go around and just find out what your lightest light is. Set these notes down here and here, set them around. Now, I do that automatically because I want to use the canvas as the first white. That's about as white. I use a white canvas, and I use it partly for this reason. The other reason is because I like it underneath everything, but I use it because I can then make this a real color, and it'll look darker than the white. And by the time I put serious darks around it, it'll actually look like the white. So I like using the canvas to find the first whites and make them clearly darker than the white of the canvas. So I don't wind up with very pale, you know, uh, colorless whites. But if you could just say, let's spot the whites around, just fleck, 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 fleck. Oh, there's a funny one. That's a yellow one. And just go around, fleck, fleck, and then begin to set your darkest darks. And in this kind of a setting, the darkest darks, that begins to establish some drawing just by blob. You see how I mean that? And if you blow your eye, of course, you'll see this whole thing is just a large middle tone blob. It doesn't mean we're not gonna change colors. I say keep your value. If you have a big value unity, if you have a big value unity right through here, keep changing the colors. Don't just paint it one flat brown or something like that, and think you're gonna add green to it later. Keep honest with the color. The color needs its day in court first. It needs to be there before anybody else even arrives at the room. Um, But yeah, right. So the patience model is really huge, 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 huge stuff. And then what happens, so you find a darkest dark like this and you see it spotted around in other places, make sure you put it around. Oh, but this one is bluer, so you made it bluer. Or maybe a little lighter or whatever, but you're just spotting around. And eventually what I'm trying to get you guys to have the patience to do is see if you can see the painting to as a likeness in just color without drawing. I tell people to do that with models, with the models sitting there with portrait models. I want a likeness of the color before you start doing drawing. Now, obviously, if you start putting blacks around a face, obviously it's going to be a big deal. So I do, eventually, you're going to, not very far hence, you're going to be putting the form of the face out there as a skull thing. But I really want the face to be the color portrait, right? The model's portrait, just in color. And I'm saying the same about all these notes. So this is a portrait of the color. This is a portrait of the color individually, as it were. Um, and just have that much respect for this. Give it time. Give it time. But these things are all functions of of where they sit in relation to each other. So the relative greenness of this, it's orangier type green than this green up here, and it's as a brown, it's obviously a green brown. This is a green one, but it's got a whole bunch more blues and reds in it, and so on, and it's moving to the reds. Anyway, you hear me talking. You see how the thinking goes, though? Does that does that intrigue you that that's what we're thinking about?
Well, yeah, and I like that. I can see that thinking in the way you teach painting and the visual order. I can I can kind of play it back in my head now,
Yeah,
hearing you talk about it.
yeah. Yeah, so later on, this has to look textured and stuff like that. But early on, it's a distribution of white spots. You know what I mean? And they're sitting there with no darks down at all. And then I start working about how dark do I make this? Well, that's determined by what happens with these meat. That's effect driven color work. And so with this, the sharp edge has to be there, then this value to this value, and this color to this color, and so on. That's a Benson conversation. You can look that up. Painting two solid colors side by side, and what happens there. But yeah, good. I'm so pleased. I'm so pleased. Let's go. I want to show you one other one. Do you have any other thoughts about this or other questions? Are we getting close to answering what you were getting at? Because we don't have to go through
Yeah,
all those pictures individually.
yeah. I am hoping you bring up the looseness again, though, keeping it open.
Let's do that. Let's go to Lindsay's, okay, for that. You can see that John's doing that pretty good here, but it does look, see, eventually what you get fooled by is a painting doesn't end where it started. In other words, this stuff might look just like busyness for a long time. By the time he leaves the day, these busynesses will be in the right place. It'll look like he painted a bunch of meandering streams going through a field, won't it? Well, not necessarily, I mean, in fact, that's specifically not what he did, right? But much like the trees, he painted color movements, maintaining the unity of this great value here and doing interesting things where interesting things happened in that set, in the color play, but maintaining the basic unity of that thing. But with broken color, though, that's a huge thing. Broken color allows you to really explore color, and that's my chief point to make to you over and over again. I'll get you the recording of the earlier attempt at this so you can replay that as you like. But let's go to Lindsay's. I think, this is a pastel by Lindsay. Lindsay's, I think, the first person that ever asked me to paint, to show her how to paint the way Gamble was teaching. And then she essentially set up the studio that I've been teaching in ever since. She wasn't responsible for it except to have been the starter. But a great friend over all these years. And thank you, Lindsay. It's really nice to have this picture to show here. But this should give you a very good idea of how the search works. You see that she's got drawing here that's very important. She's got drawing over here that's very important. But if you blur your eyes, that is the drawing you must get by the end of the day. Don't you see how that might be? And probably even earlier, because they're table setters, the proportion of where this lands in relation to the frame. You do have to have your brain around the frame the whole time, be pre-picturing this as a composition. But the exits, how much this cuts off the corner, where approximately this one exits over here, some of these exit stuff, the stuff down here, and the proportions of these things here, where this lands in relation to this whole thing, or where this one here lands. Is that 2/5, and is that, you know what I mean? Those are all things that in terms of when you begin to place things, you want to put your time into too. But if you start drawing things and then you turn out to be off in placement, you're going to be spending hours and hours removing it to another place. And at that point, you're supposed to take the lesson and say, how about I just move this until it feels right? And then you go around to all the stuff that has to do with placement of drawing and not putting time into these places so early. But the generalization, as opposed to slicking it up, the broken color gives you the opportunity to really explore color. And landscape is made to order for that. There's virtually, apart from the sky frequently, there are not that many things that could be said to be anything except broken values even. Shadows even can be flat, and yet you'll find all this leafage in them and stuff. So the look of brokenness, it's stronger in certain places here and here than it is down here. But the look of brokenness is a really cool thing. But what it does is it opens you up to the possibility of exploring the color. So all you have to do to adjust this area is take some orange and fleck it wherever it should be, and not get into it and try to paint the color of this part of the tree that is oranger. Some of those things happen, but they only happen in modest ways. When you finally get into a spot like this and you realize that has to be the right color and it has to be such and such a color where it meets this or something like that, you see the specificity does kick in, like right there, or right along this edge here. But talk about this, ask questions about that one if you want to. We're doing
I was
well,
saying earlier
time-wise.
that I took the advice of covering the canvas too literally,
Right,
and
right.
talking to you, I realized that my plein air paintings are so rigid, and there's a falseness to it that
Yeah, it's inevitable
not
with
easily
that.
identifiable. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
I end up, I'm
yep.
sorry, I end up working, um, wearing myself out because I'm really focused on filling the canvas rather than exploration.
Yes. Yeah. So that's again, we just repeat the patience of the saints model here, right? We know the end is to cover the canvas, but we know by the time we get there, I keep saying we don't want to be losing wives and kids all over the side of the mountain because we're going to go down the hill so fast, and can't we come around the bend? This is a Woody Allen, Woody Guthrie. I mean, I don't remember Dust Bowl types song, but you really want to get there with some substance, with some quality. So what we're doing is we're doing the search. The search. We want this yellow here to specifically be right to whatever yellowishnesses are happening anywhere else, because that's the game. That's what's up here. And the one thing I was repeating to you in the previous part where we got cut off was your job is, as a student, your first job is to study nature. I wouldn't have to repeat it to these guys, but it's worth repeating that your first job is to be the master of the look of nature. And there's an exploratory thing required. You have to try this and try that and this to this and that to that, and find out how. Yeah, I mean, how many different greens are in this picture? You see what I'm saying? And this isn't a question of like, oh, let's do the green thing. This is a question of, do we want the look of nature, or do we want some version of the look of nature that's based on drawing a tree? You know what I mean? Not the look of nature but what I call the likeness of the model by color. So that's the reason we need the time to explore nature, to begin to understand nature. You begin to be the master of nature. What things can happen in nature is a useful thing to know. But this thing, the intrigue that you have as an impressionist, I don't think it ever goes away, of finding out today's new juicy stuff, you know, not applying yesterday's formulas. So in that sense, we are, and it'll really take advantage of this as a student, we are more explorers than we are builders of cities, right? We're, we're not out there simply to make. Gamble said this is a picture making studio. I agree. That's our long goal. But our short goal is to be master, as Ang would try to get you to be, master of nature, because nature is the source, right? And so for us to understand how colors can work and what kind of beautiful things happen because we sit there and finally see why it's so beautiful in its color movement, that's going to take time. And the broken color model is just an excellent one. And pastel is too, by the way, if I haven't mentioned that to you before, Blake. Go for it. Keep pushing.
Oh, well.
I know I carry on and put you to sleep here. I'm sorry about that.
No, no, no. Um, yeah, I don't know. There's so much that I need to work on now.
Okay.
Um,
Mission accomplished.
yeah.
I mean, you knew you had a lot to work on, but hopefully I've given you some ways of thinking. One of the things I thought was remarkable over time was how different the words were from what people had given you, or better than that, I've often thought when I was a young person and I would go to Sunday school or whatever, I would have these juvenile ways of thinking about everything you learned at church. And then I woke up to becoming an adult and realized you had to rethink everything. And there's a funny thing about that. In this world here too, people can tell you things all day long, but you got to explore, you got to play around, you got to seek out your own salvation with fear and trembling. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't want to say more, but that's really the biggest deal. Do you know that you're going to have to work this through? I can tell you stuff all day long, but you got to work it through and find best practices. But this is one of those things that I don't think you'll ever be able, in landscape in particular, you'll be able to be the same kind of a master of the look of nature until you've learned to explore, until you learn to figure out exactly which of these greens is the most chromatic and why it matters. I don't really mean to say why it matters, but you'll find out why it matters. We don't have to know why it matters in the beginning. We just will start saying, oh, that's why this, that's why that. And when you look at Degas, as much as he was avoiding plein air painting, it's amazing how good he is at this part of color. And he's a designer in color, and he called himself a designer out of a job, whatever, but decorator out of a job. But the idea of the richness and the goldenness of this green, and the relative neutrality of this one, and the relative coolerness of this one, and the way colderness of this one, what is going on out here? What's happening? So that's where this is beautiful. We go out there and we get to sit down in a place that's blowing our mind, and we sit there, and all we got to do is explore. We got to find out why. We do have to find out why it's beautiful. Not so we can do it again, because we got to get to the end of this painting and have acquired have done enough search and got enough stuff on our canvas to where we can say, see what I mean to the viewer. See what I mean? And they'll say, they'll just buy it. They won't even ask. They don't even be thinking that way. They'll just see what you mean and say, I got to have some. I wish I could spend the time meditating on nature like that. But yeah, this is the patience of the search, the very patient search. It's Tarbell referred to it as a search. Stebbins and many other people use the word patience, characteristic of the masters. So yeah, that's cool. The one thing you said though, I want to pick up on is that is the lost and found thing. There's this thing about not drawing too much that's a great mercy. So limit your drawing. Think of it that way, as limiting your drawing, meaning in this careful, articulate, got to get the exact shape of this kind of a way. Drawing is placement for a long time. Then it's sharpness of edge for a long time. And it matters not how many bumps there's on this tree for a very long time. At some point, it'll matter where the interest is on this line, where the primary, it'll be part of the composition, no question about it. And it'll be stuff you can build in sooner than later. But what you need is shall we call it the mystery of lostness, because it gives you that chance to explore. It gives you that chance to there's no drawing here. Look, I can dig in on the color movement. Or it could be anything from form to color movement, chromal movements. I mean, the beauty, the magic of what happens between this, here's a reading edge right here. There's another reading edge here. This thing goes over here, and the next reading edge is down here. Look at that. This is all lost. Now that is a gift from heaven, but partially it just produces magic visually. It's just pleasing. What is that except what I'm going to call aesthetic content of some sort? It's satisfying in some way. As soon as you make it into a leaf, it will lose some of the mystery, some of the beauty, some of the aesthetic qualities will go away. But it's a fantastic means to keep yourself under control and out of fear's way if you limit the number of things you draw. So draw what reads well, blur your eyes and see what to draw and see what not to draw. As we always talk about, the visual order stuff you were saying. You have more thoughts, Blake? Is that clear?
Yeah, that's clear. You're saying a lot of things that in my head I'm thinking, oh yeah, I do that mistake all the time.
Right.
I'll go in and search for something that's not there or shouldn't be there.
Yeah. Well, that blurring your eyes, man, you cannot blur your eyes too much because it tells you the visual order. The visual order, in one sense, when I'm saying it that way, the visual order means the order in which you ought to draw. It doesn't mean the order in which things are in other ways. We say it's about drawing. It's about what to draw first, what to articulate as shape making. And you can see the importance of shape making up here. It's important. It's the area that has the most shape, has the most contrast, the most dramatic shape. And the counterplay is down here, and then there's weaker versions of it over here. But that's the thing. So if you're drawing down in through here and you haven't done this well, you're going to be in no end of trouble. And you won't be happy with what you come back to face the next day. But that's what you're already seeing now. When you see a painting like this, you're thinking they did this stuff in here and this stuff in here and this, but you don't actually know when they did that. If they're painting the way we think, they didn't do that early. They set up this kind of power stuff early. Maybe the blob, just the end location of this. Something here, like you see in the Tarbell one. Did we look at that? I don't think we looked at this one, did we? But you can see that he's setting up with this, or with this stuff here, or with this blob here, or with this piece of this, or some other aspect. Different spots, making exits, making whatever. But you can see that he's drawing just for the purpose of setting up. For example, this mass here seems to be a significant thing. And by the way, if it's tilt, it is a significant thing. It rather reminds us of this. And there's he's building on a line that feels like this, doesn't he? Isn't he? Those things you might become aware of, but you should become aware of that also, not just color relations, but you'll start seeing patterns, start seeing there's a reason for a thing being beautiful, and you're trying to find out how much of it's pattern, how much of it's color play, color movement, and how much of it's form and whatever, But that's what you're seeking out, the relationships of all these various things. Do you have any thoughts on that, Blake?
Well,
Yeah.
the thing I really love about this painting is how open it is, and
Yeah.
it feels like he just walked away from the canvas with it still there. And
Yeah. So this is a unified lay-in, but it's a lay-in, isn't it? And yet it's pushing past the lay-in. So it's probably the second day, maybe the third day, okay? Pushing past the lay-in. But yeah, it's still wide open for business, isn't it? The search is on. It's still on. Now you can see areas where he's being more decisive. It's starting to look like this is really true, doesn't it? And now, by the way, we're looking at a photograph here. Who knows what it means? But it does look like certain areas he's coming to serious conclusions about them. And that is what exploration is in the search is. You're trying to get clarity about what this has to be. And what this has to be, if this can be this, or if that, or you know what I mean? So it's all one thing leading to another and setting up the other. And if you don't do this exploratory thing, you won't get to that clarity that you know for sure this has got to be that note. It's the only one that works. Because when you get all the other greens involved, or when you get this power station here involved, and you don't want to make that inky black, this is the same value as this. It's going to have to be X value, and it has to be twice its chroma, whatever. It's all those things, and they're all playing to each other. But yeah, is that the beauty of this thing? I mean, look at the little hack marks over here. This isn't drawing grass, is it? It's suggesting, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's mark making, all this whole area down here. Look at that. You can still see the canvas through it. I love that. I know it's one of those things you're talking about how to stay loose. But looseness is a thing that people value in itself. Nice, fine. I mean, it is nice to feel glib and for painting to feel like it's just blown on. That's really nice. But you need it in the search model. You need it when you're sitting there as the painter. You need to feel like this is open for business. I'm still comfortable. I'm still moving. I can still move. I'm not getting fixed too fast. Not getting rigid too fast would be a good way to say it. Keep talking.
Well, speaking of the rigidity, that's something I would set something rigid from the start, and it becomes so difficult
to work around it, right?
Yeah, to work around it, and it just becomes this this hole in my painting where I sinks all my time into it.
Yeah. Yes.
Fixing prior mistakes in plein air is very difficult.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one thing you may not have heard from me yet, Blake, and that is your first marks are question marks. You want to play with that one?
Yeah, that's a good one.
So, and by the way, I'm apologizing for that streak across there. Whitaker's going to be not happy with me, Mr. Producer, rather. He's not going to be happy with me for that line. But sorry, man. I didn't do it anywhere else, I don't think. But yeah, they're question marks. So where this lands and what it does, it's a significant thing in a picture like this. But you put it down with a questioning mind while you get around and get around and get around, then you have greater clarity by the time you've been around a bit. And that your clarity comes from the continuity of the relationships, from the clarity coming from, well, if this is there and that's there, is that setting up the same composition that I'm seeing through the viewfinder? And so, yeah, even your first guesses, your thoughts about where that lands, say if it's just like you think it's quarters of this thing or something like that, it's a guess that's being influenced in nature by where this is. And you don't even know it. So you put that in there and it may have it in the wrong place. But you've decided it, and you don't want to be the decider. Let it decide for itself. I had a fellow student friend, Jan Posvar, who I loved. He quoted his mom, and she said, you just, what she said, you just keep on looking until there's no decision to be made. And that's really what you're doing here. You're just going round and round and making further assessments until it's obvious what it has to be. And at some point, the painting does operate. You've heard me, I don't know if you've heard if you've listened to all the videos, you've heard it before, but it's the idea of a molecule. They tell me that whatever it is, atoms or whatever molecules, they're running around in your body when you're first born in the womb, and they're deciding where they want to be, where they're going to be. They appear to all have the option of just being anywhere and everywhere randomly. But they gradually gravitate to one spot or another and become part of the brain. And then they become more specific, and it becomes more and more fixed. Can you find that as a model for how to get to fixedness in a painting like this? If you think that way, it's more organic, and it's more fluid and more open for business. But you got to look like you're open for business. So you got to this is one of the hard things to do. You got to make categorical statements, but have the mind of an explorer. So you got to make a statement. Like the edge of this tree, make a statement, even about its placement, and this statement. And then you get around. By the time you get around, you know that they were negotiable. But you had to make them good, strong statements that look like themselves, but not ones that where you're buying into fixedness. So I tell you to make it as like as you can the first time, but don't buy into fixedness. Isn't that funny? You like that one? Like,
Yeah, there's a lot of riddles.
yes, I've been accused of that. Yeah, you're teaching riddles. Yeah, truth is a riddle, though. I mean, you can say things, but you can't say it. Words don't quite do this, so that's why your practice is what opens the riddles up to you. You know, you actually have to work it out in practice.
Yeah, yeah. You have to think them over
Yeah,
and live it.
exactly. Oh, yeah, that's the beauty of it too. One of the things I'm looking for in life is for all you guys to do this, working it out, and becoming your own authority, and then comparing notes with me. You know, not looking over your shoulder and saying, "What would Paul say?" But you become, you know what I mean? You've done your exploration. You've been around the world. Now you're going to go and offer something. You're going to have, now the conversation between us can broaden out in amazing ways. And that's a thing to look forward to for everybody. What do you think? We got somewhere? Do you have any points that we didn't cover well enough? Or did we?
No, I think there's a lot of actionable advice here, and I'm really looking forward to getting out there tomorrow.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I hope other people will give us feedback too about what this meant to them and if they have other follow up. If you want to come and join me, if you want to bring a painting of yours, we can put it online and I can talk about it, do a critique. Somebody asked if I do that. I do it online. I do it offline too. But if you wanted to do that and be a voice in my background, just like Blake here, please follow up. You know, your own exploration is one of the things I really like about my audience is you all seem to be out there trying to do this. A lot of you, not everyone, I know, but it seems like a ton of you guys are, and I really like feedback, and because it helps me to know if I'm actually doing anything of value for people. If I'm a preacher and everybody's living the same sinful life, what good is it? you know. But I wanted to know if I'm actually making any. If you yourself can see change, or if you can actually bring more clarity to yourself to make change work more clearly. I'd love to have that happen. All right. Hey, Blake, thank you. Last words are yours.
Oh no, thanks a lot, Paul. I really appreciate it.
All right. It's great having you. Thank you for being willing to do this for us twice now.
Of course.
All right. Take care. And I'll say goodbye to everybody now. See you all in the next one. Let me know if there's anything else we can do. Thank you again, Adra, for that really nice donation for all you guys. And I meant to have the list in front of me, but I just don't, of all you guys who contributed during the live stream. That was really huge. I thank you very much for that and for being there. So many nice bits of feedback. I am making, a couple of you guys have offered to be involved with me and trying to get my book out there for you guys, and I'm working on that. I'm probably also going to do a bit of a crowd fundraiser, what do they call it, crowdfunding or something, for this studio we're building that I can then use for summer workshops and that sort of thing. For all of you people who might like to come, and I'm trying to figure out ways. I would like to make a donation of that book if I can manage to get it done to anybody who wants to make a donation to us. I mean, make that an offer. I'd also, for seriously large donations, once this comes out, be interested in and be willing to trade your donation for a piece of the cost of any workshop. So it'd be paying a portion of your own workshop if you want to be at one of my workshops in the future. So. All right, and I do mean to do that heavy-handedly, shall we say, or thoroughly from the time going forward. As soon as we have this building in hand, next summer will probably be our first really full-scale workshops for a whole summer. All right, that's a lot. Meant to be short this time, but never know. All right, you guys all have a great painting week. We'll see you next time.